The recording set. All right, so that's good. Let's see if I can figure out sharing here. All right. Are you able to see the PLS screen?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thank you all. All right, well, thank you all to the Product Leader Summit. We're kicking off Q3 on a new direction here. I know we've kind of spent the last couple quarters here focused on the job search, but and preparing in some things around product craft. Our goal really here to move forward is to focus on product craft, and you'll see that with this talk today, and then we're going to continue that throughout the rest of the quarter. We've got some amazing talks coming, but let's talk a little bit about the Product Leader Summit speaker series. This is a grassroots movement that was kind of grown. I think a lot of people here have probably either been to a product leader summit or are part of the community there. It's really about product leaders connecting with other product leaders. And the growth for this speaker series really came out from the fact that the summit only happens once a year. So we only get to hang out with each other for 2 to 3 days, maybe 4. How do we stay in touch with each other for throughout the remainder of the year? And that's what kind of birthed this speaker series. And we're just past a year in now for this speaker series. So we've brought a lot of topics. We continue to post this on our YouTube channel, and we have a newsletter. So if you want to go take a look, we continue to push content every month around this. But our goal really here is to foster the next generation of product leader speakers and continue to grow our craft and lean into each other. So we want to facilitate deeper connections and learning amongst product leaders. And that's what today's about. And today's topic is really about how do we as product leaders partner with what we probably call our secret weapon, depending on how you actually go about it. Maybe it's not a secret weapon for you and it's a tenuous relationship with you, but if you can make it really work. And the moments where I've felt really great partnership across the leadership team has been where I've had a finance partner who I am in very sync with around what we're proposing, what that means to the business for both the current as well as the future. So we've got 2 amazing speakers here who are finance leaders with Zach and Larry. And Parul here will be moderating the talk for us. So I'll go ahead and send that over to her. But throughout the chat, again, part of us is to make deeper connections. So I'll be putting in my LinkedIn. I think others do that as well. Please feel free to connect with others offline out of this. So what we'll do is we'll let Parul kick off and we'll have this talk here. And then we'll save about 15 minutes for Q&A towards the end. But you do not need to wait for that. Please put in your questions in the chat and I'll continue to queue those up towards the end for the last 15 minutes. So excited for this one. Parul, this one's all yours.
Thank you for the introduction, Nishad. Hello, everyone. My name is Parul Goyal, and I wanted to really start with a quick confession, which is until I took this role at Indeed, which I have been in for 4.5 years or so, I had never had a real conversation with a finance person unless they were doing my taxes. Like they were not a stakeholder I had any familiarity with, to be honest. And then I ended up taking this role at Indeed, where I was leading product for their financial systems. And I will also admit I had a very different understanding of this role before I took it. And so I remember those, like, honestly, first year and a half where I would be in meetings and with accounting and tax and there will be all these conversations about closing the books and revenue reporting and why payment reconciliation needs to be automated and creating journal entries and backing them out, and I had no idea what any of that meant, right? And I was in a leadership role, so I would just nod along like I knew what was happening, but I didn't know what was happening. I was really Googling it or Slacking people to find out what is it that they're talking about. And so I had to like learn fast. Like I really had to get on it very quickly. And I did, like, I kind of leaned on like product strengths of just focusing on why to begin with. So I could have a better grasp of the situation instead of letting myself be overwhelmed by the terminology. But really the main thing I realized is even when I was not building for the accounting team or the finance team, even if I was building for the end employers or I was building for the CS team, if I brought in finance in some of these conversations and I communicated clearly, it led to better product decisions. In some cases, it actually led to a simplified product we could push out quicker. And that's why I'm really excited about this conversation today, because let's be honest, finance and product don't always speak the same language, but we are working towards the same goal. And if we were able to better communicate, we would be more impactful in growing our business. So we have two fantastic, really experienced finance leaders, Larry and Zach, who have experienced this reality from the other side. So we're going to hear from them, their experience about collaborating with product, what works, what doesn't work. We will hear real stories, some honest moments, and hopefully lessons that you can take away and apply. So with that, Larry, I'm going to pass it on to you. Maybe you talk a little bit about what you're doing right now, and then a quick story about working with product that stands out in your mind.
Sure, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Larry Call. Thank you for having me. I'm based out in Jacksonville, Florida. So I've got close to 25 years of finance experience, the majority of which was in FP&A. My last role was with Fanatics. I'm sure many of you have probably heard of Fanatics. That's how I know Shuba. Um, and in that role, handful of different positions within the finance organization. But when I exited, I was leading finance transformation. So that team never existed. And so to give you just a quick story, maybe on my interactions with product. Um, so as I mentioned, I was spending a lot of time doing FP&A work. I got tapped on the shoulder in 2019 to lead a global ERP implementation, laser focused on finance operations implementation, not up to the supply chain, et cetera. And so we had the product selected, we had an implementation partner, we had an outside consulting company. And so we were beginning to scope out kind of what the roadmap looked like, what the project looked like. And quite honestly, I had a really good handle on technology, um, but I wasn't ready for what I was getting myself into. As many of you know, an ERP implementation is career defining in that it can go one of two ways. Fortunately, it went the right way for me. But as I looked across this project, I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to take too long. It's too complicated. It's across the US, the UK, and Japan. And I started to begin really questioning, like, should we do this? And I had a product manager who was my partner, who was, internal to Fanatics, that really we spent like probably 4 hours that day at the end of the day to just get me comfortable to say, we're going to do this. We're not going to start with Japan. We're going to start with the US, and we're going to, we're going to meet the scope and the deadlines, et cetera. And that relationship where that product manager kind of got me level set really began the relationship, and she was the key partner through the entire project internally to keep everything on the rails. So that really gave me a whole appreciation for product management. Um, and yeah, so really great story, and really happy to be here.
Thank you, Larry. We definitely want to. I have more questions about that
Yeah.
experience. We'll come back to it. Zach, over to you. Again, what you're doing
Yeah.
right now and the story.
Yeah, so currently I am the VP of Finance at a tech startup called Tilt. So we do leave management software and work for companies. So part of the HR tech stack, and that's a very gross simplification of what we do. It's quite an interesting world and very complex. If any of you have gone on any type of leave, you probably know and understand that. But So that's my current role. I'm over all things FP&A and accounting, and really trying to heavily focus on building out much more of a strategic finance arm and less so on the, I guess, what we would traditionally be called operational or finance or accounting. So not that they don't matter, but variance comments and budgets aren't the most fun and sometimes not even the most useful things. And so trying to transition and get the team to be thinking beyond that and have the organization think of finance beyond that as well. So quick story. Man, there's some fun ones and some crazy ones. I'll share. I was at a prior company and we were trying to build out a roadmap and as part of our forecast for the next year. And we had these like really ambitious growth plans, and I kept getting beat up and picked apart by the management team because they'd say, well, how are you confident that we're going to do this? Like, what are the things that make up this growth that didn't exist last year? And I was sitting there, I was like, we're going to be better. We're going to do more. And I just like had no defense. Like I had nothing that I could do to defend this. And so I was fortunate enough to sit down with some of our product leadership team, and I was like, I need your help. Like, what are we going to put out next year that's going to make us win? Like, why is our sales team going to close more? Like, what's going to happen? Or what's going to bring new dollars in the door? And from that, was able to like that was kind of the first bridge, I think, in that role into building a relationship with the product team. Up until that point, I'd been focusing so hard on sales because we were a very sales-led growth. And it was great because we were able to take this new product feature that we were going to roll out that was going to add dollars right away. It wasn't about like, oh, unlocking a new segment or anything like that. It was just this new feature that we could monetize immediately. And we built a model, and we were able to use that model to inform the forecast and say, well, this much of the uplift is coming from this. And then we were able to use that model going forward to say like, hey, did we come anywhere near our expectations? Like what did we get right? What did we get wrong? And it allowed us to adjust some things in the product because of that. So great bridge builder, helped save my bacon with the management team, so I wasn't looking like a clown up front and having no explanation for why we were suddenly just going to be 20% better than we were. So yeah.
Nice. Thank you, Zach. Um, I want to go deeper in, for the first topic that I want to talk about is where do finance and products interests overlap? But before we get into that, finance is kind of an umbrella term, right? It's not one function. There are multiple functions, and both Larry, Zach, both of you have like done multiple functions within finance. So maybe we could start with like when we say finance, what teams do we mean? And like usually what are their goals? Like what do like, for example, what does accounting care about? What does tax care about, etc.? If you consider tax within finance.
Yeah, sure. So I think sometimes when we say finance and accounting, it's like a mystery. And I want to try and educate the group that there's several pillars within the organization, and depending upon the size, it might vary. So think of it as a finance team, right? And under that, you're going to have accounting. And then within accounting, you're going to have different layers within that, whether that's controllership, AP, AR, staff accounting, et cetera, et cetera. And then you're going to have a finance team, a finance pillar. Within that, you're going to have FP&A, analysts, et cetera. You're going to have a treasury team that's spending their time working on cash management, dealing with the banks, dealing with debt, capitalization. You're going to have a tax team, and in some instances, you're going to have an investor relations. So if you think about it, there's several pillars to the one function, and within those functions, there's various roles and responsibilities with different stakeholders and different interests. So I think sometimes in my past, when dealing with the technology team, it's just like, oh, the finance team's got it. The accounting team that closes the books got it. And it's very matrixed, and oftentimes different folks or stakeholders within finance and accounting are going to have different needs. So I don't know, Zach, if you want to add on to that.
Yeah, I'd say that's an accurate description. I'll throw in there because I've mostly worked in startups, smaller companies. Usually your accounting and your tax and treasury are one group, and that's if you're fortunate, a controller that's managing that, and with maybe a couple accountants. A lot of times you outsource your tax. That's an easy one to outsource. And then I think the other thing I'll add is often, and we're starting to see this more with vertical SaaS becoming very popular and usage-based models becoming very popular. You're starting to see payments teams start to pop up, and often under the purview of the CFO. And their job is to make sure that you're mitigating fraud, that payments are able to go through successfully and smoothly, that you're managing the payments cost because it turns out it's expensive to pay for things, and stuff like that, fighting chargebacks, disputes, other things like that as well. And then I'll throw one in there that it's kind of a moving target, and it's a little bit of become a fun buzzword, especially among software companies, is RevOps, right? Revenue operations. And you are starting to see RevOps living under the CFO much more often, because CFOs are being tasked, and really the role of a CFO, especially in smaller companies, is changing to be so much more revenue focused and growth focused.
Yeah.
Whereas historically the CFO has really been about like, hey, how do we mitigate expenses and not get sued and pass audits, right? And so RevOps lives in a lot of different places. Sometimes it's under a CRO, sometimes a COO, sometimes a CFO, but that's another one you are sometimes seeing RevOps or BizOps living under a CFO now too.
Zach, you actually bring up a really good point of the shift from finance teams being like, oh, we need to mitigate risk. Like, we need to make sure we are compliant. We need to make sure we pass our audits, to like them becoming a more strategic partner. I wonder if this relates to something you were saying earlier, a strategic versus an operational arm
Mhm.
within finance. Like, in your mind, what's the difference between those two and their goals?
Yeah. I mean, operational is about keeping the lights on and keeping things moving forward, right? You're the lubricant that keeps the engine running, right? So
Mm.
you're
Like closing the books.
closing
Sorry.
the books, yeah, sometimes running payroll or
Mm,
doing that in conjunction with HR. You're paying your vendors, you're
mm,
collecting the money that you need to collect, billing the customers you need to bill. Um, Closing the books is a very broad term, so there's a lot that goes into that. And then I think like there's also an element of like budgets and budget versus actual comparisons and like commentary on that as well. And then as you get into larger companies, there's also an aspect of like intercompany management and treasury and then those types of things that are, I would consider that to be the operational accounting or operational finance. It's keeping the lights on, keeping things
yeah.
running. When I think about strategic, this is where you're really thinking about like ROI, right? This
Mm,
is where you're shifting your finance team mindset into like, hey, we need to mitigate costs, we need to mitigate risk, into like, what are we maximizing the return we're getting on our investment on the capital that we're using, whether that's more growth, whether that's a higher return because you've found a way to spend less, whatever it might be. And I think that's really where finance is evolving, and where the ask from a CEO to a CFO is changing, and the CEO is asking the CFO to be a partner in strategy and be a partner in growth, and really owning that much more.
okay. So I think this kind of is a good segue in my next question. Zach, maybe you can speak to it first, given we were just talking about this. I was going to ask you, where do you see finance and product working towards the same goal? Where do you see that overlap? Like, can you maybe speak to it both with the strategic arm and the operational arm?
Yeah. On the operational side, I think this is probably where you're going to run into the most amount of conflict. Things,
Yeah.
all things being said, because like accounting wants things to follow a pretty set process. They want things to be predictable. They want things to
Be
follow
automated.
these, yeah, they want it to be automated. They want it to follow these neat rules that a bunch of people have created that we call ASC rules, right? And there's a bunch of them. They're accounting standards, and that's what accounting wants, right? I think most of us know like the world's not that black and white. It never is, and it never will be. And I think that's also a hard thing for product to like accept, right? Because in their mind, their job, at least my understanding, product's job is to excite their customers, right? And their job is to develop things that their customers are going to say, I need to have that. I want that,
Yeah.
right? And I need to have that and I want to have that is not typically something somebody says in association with an accounting rule.
Yeah.
Right. And like I don't know a lot of people who are like, I want this product and I want it to work with revenue recognition perfectly. Right. Like I don't think I've ever heard that in my life. And if somebody says that, I'm gonna be like, are you crazy? Like, well, who are you? So I think that's where you see a lot of like
Yeah.
that. This is where finance is like the bad guy and the black and white and the rule follower,
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, you gotta tell me these things. When I think about aligning things, this is much where I think the strategic arm of finance and product really should be best friends, right? Because if product is shipping something that makes
Yeah.
customers just crazy happy, excited, that means growth, right?
Yeah.
That means less churn. That means more new customers. And that's what a strategic finance person is going to be like, hey, I want to mitigate churn. I want to make our sales reps more efficient. And I want to have the best NPS scores we've ever had. And
Yeah.
so like, well, that sounds exactly like why you're building a product, most likely, right? It's probably one of those three reasons that have driven this product decision. And so should be in theory much more aligned than I think we initially would react to. Larry, I'll let you talk on
Yeah.
that too, for sure.
Yeah, so on your example that you just gave there, Zach, I mean that's important for the product manager because that's going to be the key contact into the organization for technology and understanding, you know, how much is this project going to cost us, right? And what's the return that we're going to get? So I would be, finance would be relying on the product team to help provide some of those inputs so that you can then design what the ROI is, what the revenue generation is, or the cost optimization. So, you know, oftentimes finance is a collector of inputs,
Yeah.
and that's why product is so important because you need it to work together because you don't want the tech team to just go build and then the finance team's trying to figure out how's that going to impact the financials. So really important to have that collaboration there.
I think
So there,
I think
oh, yeah.
something Larry said here is important too, though, is like you're collecting in finance, we're collecting inputs. And I think what's key about that is we take those inputs and we create something with them, right?
Yeah.
And those metrics tell us something about the business. And I'll give an example here that wasn't product, but I think tells the story really well. I was sitting with the sales team and we were trying to work on like how are we going to make the sales team more efficient. And so we listed off all these things we could do, and like they were small, just a bunch of small things, right? Like, hey, we could implement an auto dialer for the BDRs, and we could clean up our lead source. And so we started attaching like, okay, this is a 1% uplift, this is a 2% uplift, this is a this. And I was like, all right, so which ones of these are we putting in? And the sales team picked like 10. And they're like, yeah, 10 of them. Those 10 out of 20, that seems reasonable. And I was like, okay, but like that's a lot. And they're like, no, it's only half of them. And so I ran these numbers through the model, and it ended up giving like a net uplift per AE of like 45%, just because they compounded on each other, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, so you think you can get all 10 of these? That would suggest we're gonna get a 45% uplift.
Yeah.
You guys comfortable going to your AEs and telling them they're gonna be 45% more productive next year? And the sales leadership was like, no,
Yeah.
not at all, right? And so we
Yeah.
went back and we adjusted. But like the same thing happens. Like, I think product can get really excited about an idea, rightfully so. That's what I want them to do. And they'll be like, hey, this is gonna improve our average customer value by like $2,000. And you're like, oh, that's awesome. If that's true, our LTV CAC is gonna double. And they're like, oh, I didn't put it that way. I didn't think of it that way. Maybe I'm being too ambitious with my estimation here, right? And like we as the finance person can help them make that connection, right? We can show like if this has the impact you're saying, this is what it's going to do to our KPIs.
Yeah.
And that might be tiny, that might be massive, and that will help us say like, do we think we're right?
Yeah. So a little bit of a sanity check, reality
Yeah.
check / sanity check.
Maybe one more thing to add on that too in that example is then working back with product to prioritize those 10 initiatives that you want to implement, to use Zach's example. And then additionally, what is the bandwidth from the engineering team to be able to make it happen?
Yeah.
Right. So it's a fine balance, but to me, the connector is working with the product team through that whole cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, do we have the bandwidth to do these 10 things? Even let's say like it was, even if we thought the uplift was reasonable, is the capacity that we have, like, and we realistically get them all done.
Right.
Yeah. So I wanna talk a little bit about the impact of not bringing finance in. So let's say we launch a new product and we never talk to anybody in finance before doing that. Like, what's the worst that can happen? Like, what could go wrong?
A lot. So it could be a train wreck.
Let's start with the worst case scenario.
Uh,
Then more reasonable of what's likely to happen.
I don't have one. There are so many bad ones, I don't even know which one to pick. I think in my experience, oftentimes I felt like finance and accounting are sometimes in the dark when it relates to some things that product and technology are doing. And it absolutely can't happen because ultimately, we need to be able to recognize the revenue coming in,
Yeah.
apply the costs, and be able to capture all the financials that are related to things. And so, I was in instances where they've launched product at the wrong time and messed up, month end closes, quarter end close. If you're a publicly traded company, the impact on how that goes to reporting your earnings. So yeah, I've often said if technology is ever going to do anything that's going to potentially impact anything dollar related, finance has to have a seat at the table and be part of the roadmap discussions.
So, Larry, let's say the financial reporting either did not happen on time, right? We did not close our books, or because we were forced to close the books on time, that means the numbers were not accurate. What happens then? Like, why does it matter? I'm
If
asking because I did not know why it mattered 4 years ago.
Yeah. So if you think about the CFO in
Yeah.
a company, no matter what size you are, you're always trying to deliver sort of the three C's, right? You want to have credible results, you want to have confidence result with your results, and you want to be consistent, whether you're private or public. And so an error on your financials, no matter whatever size company you are,
Yeah. Yeah.
flags an audit, publicly traded, you lose a lot of those three C's. So um, it's common knowledge, but you always have to report your financials on time and accurately. Full stop.
Does it impact your share price if they're wrong?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. So if you think about a publicly traded company, once you kind of close the quarter, you're
Yeah.
on the immediate clock to then report your earnings.
Yeah.
So everything is dialed in from the accounting close to then, pulling everything together in terms of what you're going to, share with the street in terms of your results, if you're going to guide the next quarter, guide the remainder of the year. And so any hiccups in sort of the timing of any of that creates major friction. And if you're publicly traded, all that stuff's got to be super buttoned up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I just want to reiterate for the product people on the call is if your product is going to make money, there we have to figure out how to recognize revenue and report it correctly before you launch it. Otherwise, what Larry said is like your quarterly earnings are going to be at risk. This is something that I took me a while to learn. Zach, anything else you want to highlight? Like what could go wrong?
Yeah. Second, everything Larry said, it also you could invoice wrong, right? And
Yeah.
that means you're not getting the right amount of money in the door, which cash is king, right?
Yeah.
And so you got to have that. I think, the other thing I'll share is for non-publicly traded companies, it's still massively important and it can have pretty serious impacts on your valuations, especially if you go fundraise, right? And so I know a firm that they just did a fundraising round and their fundraising round was 8 days.
Yeah.
And it went so fast because they had a good, clean data room
Mm.
and they got rewarded for that. They had a very favorable valuation that made it very great for them. Of another company where the finance person messed something up on the financials. It was discovered by the investors as part of due diligence, and they ended up knocking down a pretty significant amount of the valuation because of that, right? And that hurt the company. And so that wasn't product's fault for either of those, but product can make those things easier, and product can really help you have a clean data room, can help to ensure that your data is correct, and product can really throw a knife in, a wrench in the gears or whatever you want to call it, right? They can mess that up pretty bad, pretty quickly.
Yeah, so the impact on confidence, whether it's for the market or the investors, really is at what's stake here.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
If there is one thing you take away from this session, please let this be it. This is why it's important to work with finance, and it's important to bring them in on time. All right, so let's now talk a little bit about what good looks like. I think both of you shared a story at the beginning of the panel about where there was a successful collaboration with product. I don't know if you want to elaborate a little bit more about that experience, or maybe another story comes to mind where like the collaboration really clicked, and then what made it work?
Sure, yeah, I could go.
Yeah.
We had an example at Fanatics where we were leaking about $2 million in tax.
Hmm.
So just quick, simple. You buy the hat, customer pays the tax, etc. So at the end of the year, you get audited to ensure that all those taxes are cleaned up. And what was ended up happening is taxes are super complicated, and sometimes by county or by type of apparel, we weren't collecting properly. So so if you think about product interacting with finance and accounting, sometimes like it's usually not sexy, right? So here we are, like, how do I sell this and get the resources to capture it? So
Mm.
it's all about communicating the value creation, right? I'm not going to go drive revenue, but I just found an opportunity where we've got, cost leakage, $2 million. And ultimately, in its simplest form, what we basically needed to do was tune the rules behind the scenes to be able to capture those tax implications so that we weren't on the hook as a company to have to pay for them. And so, what we did was we really just championed sort of a project and rallied around behind it, right? Because you got to sell it up to executive leadership to get the buy-in, and then you got to figure out how you're going to get the tech resources on the background to shift away from like revenue generating opportunities to go get after this. And then really what it was is just pure collaboration with a high velocity of touch points and communication and updates on what were happening. Because a lot of times, for finance and accounting teams, like anytime that there's sometimes dealing with technology, like it's part of their part-time job, right? So I often call it kind of like picking the bag up and putting the bag down. Sometimes you'll be like, oh yeah, let's go do this project and get the $2 million. And you do like the first check-in and 6 months later, and you kind of forget of everything, what everyone's doing. So I would say like real good, solid program management with the product team kind of created that successful outcome. Yeah.
So, Harry, in this case, it sounds like finance was the one that recognized that opportunity that we have this 2 million leak in tax that we need to address.
Yeah, so we found it, and it was
Okay.
like buried in the grand scheme of things. We're
Yeah.
huge companies buried, but still every dollar counts.
Yeah.
And so, I had to particularly kind of sell it to the technology team of why we needed to create the capacity on the technology team to go get after this, because where we were working, like that's a much smaller number relative to some other prior initiatives that were out there.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going with this. So you you identify this opportunity, 2 million, you talk to somebody in technology, the conversation really would start with, yeah, but how does it compare to other things on our roadmap in terms of
Yep.
value? So what was that conversation like for you in this instance?
Um, for me, it was I had already gotten sort of the credibility at the company. Um, And really what I did was I spent, and I had a relationship with the chief technology officer. So because of that collaboration, everyone sort of rallied behind it to put the resources to make it happen.
And then what worked for you was that it wasn't just that product came back and told you when it's done. You were kind of kept in the loop throughout the implementation. So you had confidence it was being worked on and not just,
Yeah, and so we were able to, what gets measured gets managed. So
yeah.
as we were kind of building it, we were
Okay.
able to then do all the reporting and dashboarding behind to see the
Got it.
leakage go away. And so when you rally behind that, that keeps the team on track to persist, to get all the way through it.
Yeah. The shared metric, like the number one is everybody buys into this is a problem worth solving, and then having some kind of a shared way of measuring success that both teams or all teams are invested in. Would you say that's?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
That's right.
Zach, what about you? What's your experience of where the collaboration worked?
Yeah, mine was a simple one, and it was awesome. My team had begun building these relationships with people on product. We had a product manager come to us, and it had been spun out of this request that she had and that she wanted to explore had been came to us because of a conversation that I was actually a part of in with the executive team, and so I chuckled as it came because it was funny to me. But there was this desire. I was working at a company where we were on a usage model, and we charged a percentage fee of something that got booked, and we charged a significantly higher fee if that booking occurred online,
Mm.
and if it occurred as like a walk up or a phone call in, we really didn't make much money, if none at all, right? And somebody was like, "Oh, well, there's all these companies that have these like huge lines out the door of people trying to get checked in. Like, what if we just sent our customers a banner with a QR code on it, and people could just check in with that QR code, like scan on their phone, and that would help speed up. That'd be great for the companies because it'd speed up their operations, and we'd make a ton more money." And I was like, I mean, do we really have any idea like how big this could be? Like, so my head went immediately like, there's no way this is legit, right?
Yeah.
But then, that because enough people on the executive team were talking about it, it got pushed to product as like, hey, let's go explore this. This is going to be a gold mine.
Yeah.
And so this product manager comes to me, she's like, hey, I heard you might know something about this, and I was like, I know a little bit. Let's talk. And it was great because then we got to sit down and say like, okay, let's like, if we were to roll this out, if we were to do this,
Yeah.
who are the customers that we think, like, what are the verticals that would benefit from this? Okay, it's these three verticals. Okay, how many customers do we have in those verticals? All right, we've got, this much. And how much revenue are they doing today? And how much of that's online versus this back office walk up? And like by the time we had like gone through this and being as like aggressive and like optimistic as possible, it came out to be like a $200,000 opportunity. And it was going to cost us that much just to like build it, right?
Yeah.
And I was and so like it was just, and it was only like 30 minutes, 40 minutes that we spent like just sitting down and going through all this data. And then we were able to then go back and be like, hey, not worth going any further on. And it kind of just immediately quieted everybody down, right? But I think, had my team tried to do that, we would have been like, oh, well, what are the how many people do we think will adopt it? Like, like we would have just stuck in this, like, what are the inputs? Like, what do we need to know? And had product team try to do that by themselves, they would have been like, well, I'm not sure how much revenue this customer makes and how much revenue is this customer. I don't know, right? And so it would have taken a lot longer, but just by us sitting together, knocking it out for 45 minutes, it was piece of cake, breeze. We had our answer, moved on, done.
Save the company all this capacity.
Yeah.
So I think what you're saying is that finance has a piece of the puzzle and product has a piece of the puzzle. And when we put it together, we can then say what's worth it, what's worth building versus not worth
Yeah.
investing.
I think it's playing to your strengths, right? Like,
Yeah.
what I say next is not intended in any way to be a put down or insult, but like finance people are generally speaking way better at modeling things than a product person is, right?
Product people
And
are optimistic.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, and not even about how your general
Yeah.
attitude is. It like if you ask me to build a model with assumptions and inputs, I can whip one out in 15 minutes and get it to you, right? Maybe a little longer if it's more complex, something like that, right?
Yeah.
I gotta imagine that most product people can't do that, right?
Yeah.
And not because they're not smart, not because they're not capable, just because that's not their skill set. That's not their expertise. That's not where they spend their time. Likewise, if you asked me to go and talk to a bunch of customers and ask the right questions and dig deeper, I'd probably like, well, the customer said this, and I just like, that's what they said, so it's true, right?
Yeah.
Whereas a
Yeah.
product person would be able to be like, no, I was able to,
Yeah.
I know what that type of question is. I know how to ask the follow-up question that gets to the actual truth, right? So, yeah, you play to your strengths, right?
Articulating your assumptions, validating them to some extent, quantifying them. I said product managers were optimistic. That's definitely true of me because I had a very ambitious agenda. So I do want to make sure we leave some time for Q&A, but I do want to get to what doesn't work. Like what patterns or behaviors have you seen in this partnership between finance and product that you haven't found to be productive?
Defensiveness.
Okay.
I think that's the biggest thing. But I remember there was a specific, we were working on improving our conversion from booking something to paying, and part of that was that we had rolled out new ways to pay in the wallet, right? And we were seeing some really great results from this. And so that was being reported to the executive team as like, we've improved conversion by this percent. And then we were having some issues with NDR and understanding why NDR was down. And the executive team came to my team and was like, hey, we're really struggling to understand why NDR is down if conversion is up. Like, is demand that much lower? And so my team naturally went to what we would define as conversion and what we thought conversion was, which was a slightly different definition that the product team was using. And it actually showed that like net conversion, the way we were looking at it, was only a little bit up, relatively flat. And so like we went and presented that, and then it led to this kind of a fight of product coming to us saying like, what the heck, you surprised us and said that we were lying and blah blah blah. And I was like, whoa, like time out. Like, I never accused you of lying at all. Like, I just was presenting the number I was asked, and they're like, well, we've been presenting it. And I was like, I didn't know you were presenting that even. And like, and then it came to find out like they weren't wrong. They were just looking at the conversion from like when somebody clicked book to pay, whereas we were looking at the conversion from when somebody went to a website and actually made it to pay, right? And it was a different story. But like the first 2-3 weeks of us debating this and fighting this, we weren't making progress because they felt like we had blindsided them and attacked them and like made them look really bad, and they were very defensive, and probably rightfully so. But it just, no progress was made, right? It was a fight more than it was anything.
Yeah. So would you say, Zach, it's just again coming to the table with like we are both in the we have the same goal of solving this problem? Is that what would have like what would
I think
have good look like in this context?
I think it's assuming positive intent. It's recognizing that like both parties want the company, they're both doing what they want to do, what they're doing because they think it will help the company succeed. And I think like there's a time and a place to place blame. Typically when you're problem solving is not the time and place to be doing that, right? And I think that you have to be willing to set that aside and say, let's solve the problem first. And if we need to talk about blame, which I think that's a very large if, like you don't always need to blame someone. If we need to talk about blame, we'll do that at the end. Let's solve it first.
If we need to talk about how to do this better the next time, I think, which usually is a lot more productive conversation than wrong. Yeah. Larry, what has your experience been? What patterns have you seen that derail this collaboration?
Yeah, so I think it's two things, and maybe the first one's a little too broad, but so sometimes what I've found is technology teams look at finance as like the finance police. Like there's just this, negative perception that they're just coming to cut costs. And like sometimes that requires a little bit of working through that. And then the second one is like, I would say it would be much appreciated over communication and being part of roadmap discussions for what technology is doing. And so at the end of the day, no one in finance and accounting ever like surprises. They never like surprises, particularly financial surprises. So if you can be looping in your finance and accounting partners on your roadmap, it's key to success.
So understanding what finance cares about and why, like having that empathy. I had somebody on my team who used to say, if we don't do this, like she used to tell the other product managers, our CEO could go to jail. That was her way of describing why finance function was important. I do think it was kind of effective. You're kind of building that empathy for finance team, but then also bringing them in early.
I think it goes both ways too, though. Like I remember for a long time, I would ask product to do something for me that usually wasn't going to generate revenue or fix anything, but it was going to make my life a heck of a lot easier. And they'd be like, no. And that was the end of it. And I would get so angry, right? I was like, no, why? Just tell me why, And eventually that led to like the product team being like, hey, would it be helpful if like we previewed the roadmap with you before like we finalized it, and that way you knew what was on the roadmap and why we're saying no to you sometimes? And I was like, well, yeah, that'd be great. And like suddenly I'm seeing this list of things they're working on, and like one of them is something that's like gonna make it so we can make a bunch more money, and another one is like preventing us from getting sued because we weren't doing our payments flow right. And I was like, oh, those are immensely more important than me being able to run one report instead of 3 reports. Like I totally understand why you said no to me. You were right to do that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get out of your hair, right? But like as far as I knew up until that point, they were just saying no because they didn't want to do it, right?
Yeah.
And so like by giving me that visibility and that insight, I was like, oh, you're doing great stuff. I'm getting out of your hair. Sorry, my bad. I shouldn't have even asked, right?
Wow,
So
that's like a game changer, right? When you understand why decisions are being made
mm,
rather than just being told the decision.
yeah, absolutely.
All right, Nishit, I'm going to hand it over to you for some questions, and then if we have time, I have one more category I would like to go over.
Sure. I think Sarah had one, but I see Larry just answered that. So I think Jeff, you had one in the chat. So if you don't mind coming off mute, otherwise I can just read it.
Yeah. Hey, how's it going? Um, so yeah, when I agree when product and finance are working together, and sometimes those connections just aren't there until one person or the other doesn't has the available time. But I think one of the places where I found it helpful and sometimes mysterious is when we have to get new headcount approved to get things done more quickly. What are some of the metrics that product leaders should come to you with when having those conversations? Like what homework needs to be done before we start talking about that?
Question. I think it depends on your org. First of all, like every org is going to have different things that are most important to them, and especially depending on their stage of where they are and how big they are, what they're focusing on is growth, what they're focusing on is cost saving, stuff like that. But I think the biggest thing that you can show is like some way to show that truly your team is working at or above capacity already, and then B, like not just that you'll like, hey, this will make everybody's life like it'll lighten the workload and that's what we want, but like here's the incrementality that will come because of that, right? And so like, hey, I can prove that my team can't take on anymore.
Uh-huh.
We want to take on more. If I bring this person in, we can take on this additional thing, and that would give us this reward, right? And I think that is going to be the easiest way to convince the finance person and the easiest way to get finance to go and be like, hey, I support this decision.
Mm-hmm.
I'm throwing my weight behind it, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks. That's great. And I think some organizations do it well, where like a conversation like this, and some are really kind of still rooted in, well, what is like the, key click efficiency of any given developer, right? And like when I've had discussion, like when operations is like, oh, it needs to be this metric, and then you talk to the finance people, it's like, no, let's have a real conversation. Don't tell me about like how many hours people are working for a day. Are you getting the work done, or are you not able to get the work done so that we can bill for something new?
Yeah. I think it also helps if you ship things on time. Product finance is much more likely to be like, yeah, you can have whatever you want. Like, I trust you.
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my
So,
secret sauce
yeah.
for sure. Thanks.
Awesome. I think I saw Chris's hand raised. Chris, if you want to come off mute.
Yeah, was Sarah, did you have yours up
Oh,
first?
I'm sorry. Yeah, Sarah or Chris. I don't know who came first.
Chris, go ahead.
Okay. I'm gonna share a story. I don't have a question. I'm gonna share a story of extreme alignment. As product people, we know that there are product-led, design-led, and engineering-led companies. But I used to work at a finance-led company. And there were so many pros to it. All of the product managers had all of these metrics, all of those CAC, LTV, ARPU, all of those on their mindset, and all of their product planning aligned to each one of those metrics. And that meant we were always modeling and always measuring the impact of our work. And it was reviews were easier, planning and prioritization was easier. The catch was that like headcount and everything became all that much more difficult because we did zero-based budgeting every single year and had to kind of negotiate and commit why we needed the headcount we needed per team. And it was pretty wild. There was a time where things were tight, and headcount was locked. And so if we wanted to give an offer out to someone with like a $20,000 bonus, finance would turn around and say, okay, where are you going to get that $20,000 from? Which rec? Like specifically. It was nuts. But a fun story was that like my role was to do segment strategy. I was working across all of the product teams. And I had an FP&A partner, which was great because yeah, they're amazing modelers, they're amazing partners. Um, and so I was looking ahead to strategic growth and looking at all of the segments and assessing what the product team could do thematically in order to drive growth in ARPU and whatnot. And I got pretty good at it. We did a lot of successful segment researches, so I got to do more of them. And there was one particular segment where everybody was excited. It was like, we're going to prioritize so many things that we haven't been able to do because this is such a big segment. There's so much money, and like there was just so much buzz generating. And it was a combination of all these financial models and right to win models, and like we would look at things in terms of like what the sales team could do in terms of time and growth. We it had everything like spelled out. Imperfect, but really, really helpful. At the end of the day, it came down to, yes, this segment is extremely profitable. Yes, these things would drive a lot of money, but not as much as these other segments. And we had to deprioritize it. And it was just like, it was crazy, but everyone, like, it was hard to argue it. It was all in the numbers. And so it's wild. I'm not saying I would race to go to work for another finance-led company. But everything you're saying about that partnership is true. Like if you can really build that partnership, there's amazing effects that come out of it.
I've never seen an executive team back off of challenging an idea faster than when the product person got up and said, here's what we want to do. Here's what we think the return is. By the way, the finance team has already reviewed and agreed to this, and they think they are aligned.
Oh
and
no,
like
our CFO was in product planning meetings.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really quick way to get things approved is get
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
both product and finance are saying yes, 9 times out of 10, I think you're going to win that argument.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Sarah, I know you got your hand up.
Yes. In my past product jobs, I didn't have a finance person. When I was in consulting, I had to do my own modeling, right? My break-even costs, like that was part of being a consultant in product and I had to manage resources and I had to like do zero-based budgeting and all of these things that came with me managing my own book of business and selling as a consultant and also managing a product team. And I've been to many different companies and they have finance business partners, they have FP&A, they have all of these different type of finance folks depending on how it's set up, or you're just purely R&D, right? There's so many different roles that product can play. In you all's experience, um, what is the ideal if you could build your own perfect company and partner with products? What does that look like? Do you want to be like, do you think like every team or every director or every VP should have a uh, finance business partner? What if it was ideal, right, to be able to get the insights of who at what level or how you want to organize it, what would that look like? So you have the best insight on product as well as like and finance and a good grip on it. What would that look like if it was your ideal structure?
Yeah, so I think it really depends upon the size of the company, but I think it should be a singular team embedded within finance that's managing that with product. So, like I mentioned earlier, created this finance transformation team. So there was, a handful of us that interacted with technology and sort of managing, understanding the roadmap and then scoring these projects. So I think more centralization is probably better. Said differently, like I wouldn't I wouldn't set it up like, hey, we've got a finance person supporting the product person in supply chain. We got another finance person supporting product person in technology, et cetera, et cetera. I would try and centralize it if possible with the finance group or team kind of supporting product.
Would you think about doing it by like SKUs, right? Because some of us, let's say it's like a HR tech company, right? You have different modules, different things you sell, right? Everyone has different roadmaps. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah, I would, if I was the CFO, I would try and manage whether it's one people, two people. I have no idea the size of the company.
yeah,
A handful of people dedicated to just working with product.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think it depends, like to your point, like if you have one SKU that's doing, you know, like $10 million and another one's doing 2 and one that's doing 1, like you might dedicate one person to the 10 and then one person does the other
Yeah.
2 products, right? I again, like I said, my experience is mostly in smaller companies, and so I've really more aligned my team with like the customer journey. And so I've had a finance business partner to new sales. I've had a finance business partner to customer experience and customer success, and then kind of a finance business partner that sits with product as a whole, and that helps the communication there. And they're all reporting to me and helping me get that full picture. But then like, you know, the new salesperson and the customer experience person can come and surface like, hey, here's all the feature requests. Let's get that to the product team. And then the product person over there is working with my finance person, say, okay, like here's all those feature requests, here's the revenue associated with them, here's what's going on. And then they can help make the case and then go back to the CX team and the sales team and say, we picked these ones and here's why. Right. And so it was just more aligning it with like the journey, the customer journey, and what made most sense for us. And that was because of the size of our company, that was what made a lot of sense.
And just one quick follow-up. In an ideal world, would you all want to be able to have input on the roadmap?
Absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
Should be a partnership. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say y'all didn't hesitate on that one. So.
Yeah.
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining. Before we go, I do want to launch an NPS poll. This is how we improve ourselves and bring new topics. So if you can just take a couple minutes. Thank you so much, Zach, Larry, and Parul for running this. Great insights here today.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Larry.
Thanks
appreciate
everyone
it.
for joining.
Thank you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.